It's my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Karl Ulrich, and I'm going to let him tell you about his background. Karl came to us by courtesy of Microsoft, to which we are very grateful, and I think that deserves a round of applause. And I'm really looking forward to what Karl has to say. I do want to mention that we have had the opportunity, among many of his other accomplishments, Karl helped found a company called TerraPass, which sells carbon offsets. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but Scion Research bought carbon offsets for all of your travel miles, all of the 200 tons of carbon generated by the flights of you and whoever came with you to the conference. We bought the carbon offsets from TerraPass, and because of that, TerraPass gave us a gift from another company that Karl is involved with called Zootr, X-O-O-T-R, and we got a few of their scooters. But what they didn't tell us is that these devices take advantage of, they're kick scooters, but for grown-ups. They handle up to about 300 pounds, and they take advantage of a secret gravitational anomaly. So you only have to kick about once an hour, and the thing just rolls and rolls and rolls. I took one for a ride around the campus here, and I kept thinking, well, there must be a slight downhill grade that I'm not noticing, and then I'll feel it on the way back. And on the way back, it was the same thing. So I highly commend these scooters to you, but not if you want to get a lot of exercise, because it's mostly just rolling. Great practice for balancing. Well, let me, without further ado, bring up Karl Ulrich, whom, as you can see on the slide, is a professor and chair of Operations and Information Management Department at Wharton, and I'll let Karl represent himself to you. Karl Ulrich.
Thank you, Joel. Thanks very much, Joel. It's a real pleasure to be here. I was sitting this morning at breakfast and I'd heard words that I haven't heard for 20 years. Semantic web, fundamental data structure, and it turns out 20 years ago I was finishing up a PhD at MIT in the engineering software industry, in a problem related to engineering software. And I got sidetracked for about 20 years, and in fact most of what I'm going to talk about today is about the sidetracked stuff, all right? But it does feel a lot like an intellectual homecoming to be able to address this audience, and I think I know a little bit about at least where you come from in terms of your background and interests. What I'd like to do is first, before I even start, I want to make two acknowledgments. The first is of my co-author, Christian Turbish, who's a colleague at Wharton. And the ideas I'm going to talk about today are drawn from a book that we've just finished that should be out next year, and I just want to acknowledge his real intellectual contribution to these ideas. The second acknowledgement I want to make is to Microsoft. And as you know, Microsoft is a sponsor, a financial sponsor, both of me being here and of this meeting, and that's very much appreciated. But what you might not know is that Microsoft has also been a real intellectual sponsor of my efforts in this area. I've had a chance to speak at Microsoft, and I've had real support from Don Richardson and Simon Floyd in developing these ideas, and so I really do appreciate that and want to acknowledge that. What I'd like to do in the talk is I want to give just a little bit more about my background, because I think it speaks to why I'm interested in these questions. And then what I want to do is introduce one central conceptual framework for thinking about innovation, and that's the idea of a tournament structure for solving innovation problems. And then I want to give you 4 fundamental ways that you can improve the performance of those tournament structures in solving problems. So that's my basic plan. I also plan to leave about 10 or 15 minutes of our budgeted time so that I can address any issues, concerns, rebuttals, anxieties anyone has about these ideas. Okay, so oops. So my formal job description and title is that I'm the CIBC professor and chairperson of the Operations and Information Management Department at the Wharton School. And at least once a year you'll find me in a tie, and so that's when that photo was taken. And I, in much of my career, much of that 20-year period of being sidetracked, I have taught the core operations management course in the MBA program at the Wharton School. And those of you who either have been through MBA programs or know a little bit about them know that that's a course that's centrally concerned with process management. Where's the bottleneck? What's the capacity? How do you make things more efficiently? How do you manage quality? Very kind of process-oriented view of the world. And that does come quite naturally to me. I'm a fairly process-oriented guy. Like many of you, I get apoplectic in lines, especially if things aren't going well in the operation. And so I think you can get a sense of what that world might be like. So that's my day job, as it were. And what I want to do is reveal kind of a double life, which Joel alluded to, which is that for 20 years I've also managed to find a variety of ways, often furtively, to be an innovator and to be an entrepreneur. And I've started a variety of companies. I've worked with with companies large and small on innovation problems, mostly on really pretty fun stuff like scooters. Although, as Joel described, he revealed to you the secret that we had discovered this discontinuity in the gravitational field and had managed to find a way to violate conservation principles. I realized today, maybe we should have picked some application other than kick scooters to exploit that discovery. So I may not be the most brilliant businessman, but I've at least had a fair bit of experience in doing innovation on the ground. I knew I was coming to give this talk today. I didn't know until this morning that not only was I retained to give a talk here, but that you were all going to buy my products as well. And so you bought TerraPass, which is a carbon offset company, and scooters, and I even heard that there was a purchase of some books as well. And so I'm wondering what else you bought. Maybe there's an automated cat litter box there. There's an inkjet printer. Hopefully no one needed cervical collar immobilization devices today. But anyway, I've done a lot of stuff kind of on the ground doing innovation. All right, so what's the point of that? Well, the point is that what I've tried to do in middle age is to see if I can find a way to bring my life into a more coherent whole. Can I find a way to take this process view of the world and bring it in alignment with this real deep passion and interest I have in creating new stuff in innovation? And so the book project with my colleague and this talk really, and what I've been doing over the last couple of years, is to try to take a process view of what seems like it would be an activity that is not terribly amenable to process thinking. All right? Okay, so I want to start with, that's my introduction. The next thing I want to do is say a little bit about what I mean by innovation. And I'm going to give a simple definition and one that I intend to be extremely inclusive. So for me, innovation means no more or less than finding a new match between a solution and a need. And you can imagine solutions as technologies, but they need not be based in technology. They might also be business processes or practices or other kinds of mechanisms. And needs, you need not think of those as the fundamental need for nutrition and shelter, for example, but also various kinds of needs we have in society as consumers, both immediate physical needs and higher order needs. Now, so that's the very broad definition I'd like to introduce for innovation. And I'd like to define successful innovation as those innovations that create value and that get delivered to customers. Customers, stakeholders, users, however you want to think about the end user of the innovation. And value creating is a very simple idea. It merely means that the innovation is worth more to the user than it costs you to deliver it, that there's value created. Okay, now what are some examples? There are some examples that are probably familiar in terms of how we normally think of innovation. You might imagine, for example, in the world of consumer durables or durables hardware, the Paslode nailer there in the center of the image is an example of an innovation in that area. The need is to be able to fasten building materials, and a latent need that construction workers have is to be able to do that without a pneumatic line. And so Paslode came up with a new solution that used internal combustion to drive nails and didn't require the use of a pneumatic line. So that's kind of a standard way we might think about innovation. A newly articulated need, a latent need felt by some user group, and then a company that discovers a new solution that can be brought to bear in a way that creates value, so that the customer is willing to pay $600 for that device and it only costs $280 or something like that to make. That's a value-creating innovation. But innovation can also be thought of, I think, in many broader domains. For example, in pharmaceuticals, the innovation process is quite different from what you see in most hardware businesses. In pharmaceuticals, typically the innovator begins with the solution. In this case, a molecule called simvastatin, C25H3805. And what Merck did with simvastatin was to go look at hundreds of different biological properties, or hundreds of different biological targets, and found that that particular molecule works to control blood cholesterol. If that molecule had prevented hair loss, they would have been just as happy. They didn't know what need they were going to address. They started with a solution and went and found a need. But however they came at it, the end result was a value-creating innovation, a value-creating match between a solution and a need. I'd also like to think very broadly about innovation and include, for example, entertainment innovations. In this case, Pixar's movie Cars, which was a new solution to a long-standing need for entertainment. And I'd like to include business processes. Up in the upper right of that image is a insurance claims processing business process, where I think it would still be appropriate to think about solutions and needs and value creation. And lastly, let me point out with Capital One's innovation here that this credit card is an affinity card for professional wrestling fans. It allows you to have Hulk Hogan on your MasterCard. And I use this to illustrate that, yes, both that innovation can be applied in financial services, and also perhaps giving you some sense of how broadly I'd like to consider the word need, right? How deeply do we need that? Now, we're here to talk about engineering software. At least you are all here to talk about engineering software for the rest of the time you're here. And I think there's some important connections. Well, for me, two basic ways that we can think about what I have to say as related to engineering software. The first is that you are engaged in innovation. Those of you who provide products and services in the engineering software world, you do your own innovation. And so I believe and I hope that everything I have to say this morning applies to your own process of innovation, or can be applied to your own process of innovation, how it is that you come up with new products and services to meet your customers' needs. But I also think an equally important perspective on these ideas is that you form a critical part of the processes by which your users, your customers, innovate themselves. And so by understanding the ways in which your customers innovate, I believe you should be better positioned to meet their needs with the engineering software that you deliver. And so I think it's important, and I'm going to try today to connect both of those perspectives to these ideas, because I think both are important and both work for this context. Now, not all innovation is alike in terms of the risk and uncertainty. I think we all understand that innovation is intrinsically a risky undertaking, but I want to help to frame the dimensions of risk here with this diagram. On the horizontal axis is a measure of the uncertainty of the solution, and I measure that, or I represent that with this label, knowledge of technology. At the origin is existing technologies that you currently use in your enterprises, existing technologies that exist elsewhere that you don't use, and then new to the world technology. So that's a measure of knowledge of technology. And on the vertical axis, at the origin is existing markets that you currently serve, markets you know very well, and then existing markets that someone knows that exist but that you don't currently serve, and then all the way at the top would be new to the world markets. And I think most of us have an intuitive understanding that innovation risk is increasing in both of those dimensions. And so I've drawn there, you might think of those as kind of ISO risk lines there, so that risk is increasing on those two dimensions, and the really nasty stuff is up in the upper right, and the really low risk stuff is in the lower left. And that's convenient. I find it convenient to just somewhat arbitrarily define three horizons. Horizon 1 is the near-term stuff, improvements, extensions, variance, and cost reductions. Horizon 2 introduces some measure of technology or market risk and includes adjacent growth or next-generation products for core markets. And then Horizon 3 is really out there, exploration into new markets, new category products, exploration with new technologies. Now, I want to also take the position, argue the position, that not all of us really need to be doing Horizon 3 innovation. And that most innovation, most of the innovation that's going to create value for you, I'm glad no threats were found. So down here is an innovation, not the Post-it note, but the recycled paper Post-it note. All right, so when 3M is already making the Post-it note and green becomes a more salient customer attribute, they develop the recycled paper Post-it note. I mean, most of us would not consider that brilliant innovation, and yet they really should be doing that, right? That's really where a lot of resources ought to be invested. So it's important, and it's here. On the other hand, another extreme would be the now defunct startup called Genetic Savings and Clone, which would take Fido and clone Fido for future use in case you need to replicate your pet later. And that's a business, I mean, that's really a fundamentally new category of product and service. It's out there, right? And I guess the point I want to make is that for most enterprises, you want to think about an innovation frontier, which is, how far are we really willing to go, and how do we think about where we focus our innovation? All right. Now, we care particularly, and in fact I titled this talk, Extreme Value Innovation. And so I want to say what I mean by extreme value innovation. And let me just say, I teach in a business school, and so what I mean by extreme value innovation is innovation that makes a lot of money. All right? And so I want to, for a minute here, think about the CFO's view of innovation. And I want you to imagine that you're sitting down in a capital budgeting meeting where you're allocating resources to innovation projects. And let's imagine there's 7 of them. And so you're the innovation manager, you've brought together your case for why you want to fund these projects, and you've gathered some information on these 7 projects. The first attribute is the required investment. How much money do I need to spend? And here, this project Red Hook requires $5 million in investment. The B column is what do I expect the profit contribution to be from this investment? And let's assume that I've done 2 things to get that. I first adjusted for risk, so that if there's a 50% probability of success, that I've already discounted my expected profits to reflect that. And in this case, Red Hook, I expect to generate $53 million. Column C is then just the ratio of what I expect in profits to what I have to invest. And so that's 53 over 5, which is a value of 10.6. The fourth column is the net profit contribution, which instead of being the ratio is just the difference. So the difference between the 53 million I expect to get and the 5 million I have to invest, which is 48 million. And then column E is, as I go down these 7 projects, if I add up the cumulative profit contributions, how much would I make if I imagine funding these in order of investment? All right? So that would be one way to represent the 7 projects that I have on the plate that I think I might want to invest in. And I've ordered these 7 projects in a particular way, and if you look across those columns, you can see I've ordered them by profitability index. So the most profitable project is first. Now, I'm more a graphics guy, and I think you probably are too. So we could represent that same information, I think, a little more clearly with this diagram. This, by the way, has all of that information on it. This is an identical representation. It's a different representation that has the identical information in it. And what I do in this diagram I call the return curve. And what this diagram does is represents each project as a rectangle. The width of the rectangle, the base of the rectangle, is the required investment. The height of the rectangle is the profitability index. So think of that height of the rectangle as how many times do I get back the investment I have to place in. So a tall rectangle is one that returns a lot on the investment I have to make. All right? And so Red Hook, you can see 5 million investment and a 10.6 profitability index. The area of that rectangle is the expected profit. And the difference between the area and the width is the net profit contribution. All of that information is there, but is there geometrically and graphically. And because I've ordered these projects in order of profitability index, we get this kind of stair-stepping pattern. Now there are a couple of significant values on this graph. First of all, the area in gold has special significance. And if you think about it, any rectangle that is not a square, right, that's taller than it is wide, is one that generates profit, it generates excess profit. And so all of that gold is the excess return to innovation. That's the return above and beyond my opportunity cost of capital that's represented by this area in white. That's all the stuff, all the surplus that I get for being innovative. And for me, this is useful in thinking why it is that it's possible for some firms to earn above average profits, profits that are above the opportunity cost of capital. It's because they've discovered opportunities that return more than the opportunity cost of capital. It also, I think, explains why it is that industries like local delivery of cement don't have huge areas in gold, right? Because there just aren't so many opportunities for huge returns like this. Whereas industries where there's a lot of disequilibrium because of competitive action, because of technological change, because of societal factors, there could be many opportunities that dramatically exceed the opportunity cost of capital. The second thing that I think is useful in thinking about on this diagram is if you think thought experiment here is, what should my innovation budget be for this company? Well, I'd certainly be willing to invest 5 million. Gee, I'd keep investing out to here. I'd certainly want to fund that one, so it would certainly be 30 million. In fact, I'll move right along here until here, right? Until I get to the project that's the marginal project. The project is not going to return what I have to invest. And so this company's innovation budget would be, whatever that is, 45 million, 47 million dollars. All right. All right, so that's one way to think about innovation. Now, if you imagine this meeting, and I've been in a few of these meetings, we'll spend 15 seconds talking about Red Hook. And then we'll spend 3 hours talking about Muriel. Right? And Muriel's champion will say, well, but that's a conservative assumption, and I really think it can do a lot better. And Carlos's champion will say, no. You know, you can see that, in fact, that assumption is actually likely to be pessimistic, so forth and so on. You'll spend all your time arguing about those marginal opportunities. And what I'd like to suggest is that if you think about exceptional opportunities, that if you could devote more managerial attention to something, it would not be in being able to assess more accurately whether you should fund Carlos or Muriel. In fact, what it ought to be done, where the managerial attention ought to be focused is on trying to make your return curve look different. And in particular, trying to find what I've labeled here exceptional opportunity A and exceptional opportunity B. Because if you could find two more exceptional opportunities, then this return curve would be dramatically different. It would have been shifted up and to the right and would have left a tremendous amount of more profit potential than the original return curve. Now, the cynics in the audience will say, yeah, right. All you had to do was add 2 rows in the spreadsheet to make that graph. How exactly would we find 2 exceptional opportunities? Well, so I've now defined what I mean by an exceptional opportunity. I've defined what I mean by innovation. I want to turn now to this third point, which is a conceptual framework for thinking about how you find exceptional opportunities. Let me give you an example. This is the Oral-B cross-action toothbrush. I should first ask, anyone from Oral-B here? Gillette? Procter & Gamble? All right, I'm the expert in the room. Beautiful. Okay. The Oral-B cross-action toothbrush has annual sales of $287 million. I don't know if that's true. I just made that up. But, it's around that, all right? But it's nice not having the experts. Okay, so it's a couple $100 million in annual revenue. It's actually the largest dollar share toothbrush on the market. It's mostly due to a pioneering handle design that had a co-molded elastomeric and hard plastic shape in an ergonomic form that made it possible to use that brush in a variety of configurations, and it really resonated with the needs of the users. Now, when you see that, one reaction, and maybe even if you read a Business Week article about this toothbrush, you'd say, brilliant designer came up with this brilliant design. And in fact, I know the designers who came up with this, and they are brilliant. They're wonderful folks. But what won't be written about in that article is that what those brilliant designers did was to articulate about 200 handle designs at the level of pencil sketches. They then committed about 30 of those, about 36 of those, to foam models that were then tested with consumers using two-way mirrors to see how they held them in their hands. And then they actually made production intent designs for 5 different prototypes in the desired engineering polymers that could be used in the toothbrush lab to see how people used them and how they liked them. And as a result of that process, selected the design there in the middle that worked the best. All right? Now, it was actually a process by which hundreds of alternatives were generated and carefully screened until the best of those alternatives emerged as the exceptional opportunity. The same process is effectively how Merck discovers Zocor as well. It's a little different in that Merck begins with 10,000 candidate molecules for every Zocor that it discovers. And in fact, Zocor, you probably can't see it, but it's kind of about 2/3 of the way up in there. And the challenge in pharmaceutical development is, how do I take 10,000 molecules that don't have personalities, they're not easy to look at, they're not interesting to look at in any way on a computer screen. How do I take 10,000 of these and find Zocor without going out of business? Right? I mean, that's the economic challenge that Zocor faces. And Merck uses a tournament structure where they use a series of filters to find the most promising ones, pass them on for further investment. Pixar does the same thing. Pixar starts with 500 one-sentence descriptions of movie concepts. They call them pitches, and they use a series of filters to reduce them to one new feature film that they create each year. The pitch, by the way, for Cars was a race car named Lightning McQueen gets waylaid in Radiator Springs and finds the meaning of friendship and family. That was it. That was the whole movie. It was described in that one sentence. And it competed with 500 others to be the one into which Pixar poured $100 million to make the actual feature film. TerraPass was the business I created to do carbon offsets. The tournament structure was applied in lots of problems for TerraPass, but among them was the development of logo and identity, where we looked at 30 or 40 concepts, passed them through a series of filters until the one that we ended up with finally prevailed. The tournament structure for solving innovation problems is not just applied to what we might think of as technological innovation, but other kinds of innovation. It's the basic format behind casting shows like American Idol. In the year that Kelly Clarkson emerged as the American Idol, the process considered about 100,000 contestants. It's an even more extreme funnel than pharmaceuticals, about 10x more contestants per winner than pharmaceuticals. And it's even used in open innovation tournaments. This is some of the current contestants in the Automotive X Prize, which also has a basic tournament structure to it. I just pulled these off this week from the X Prize website. Contestants from all over the planet, ranging from a wacky inventor in a garage in Maine with this vehicle to the venture-backed Tesla Motors, are vying for a multi-million-dollar prize in what is basically a tournament structure. All right, in this case, an open tournament. All right, so what do I mean by a tournament? Well, it's a very simple idea. Fundamentally, it's a series of raw opportunities, and then it's a collection of raw opportunities and a series of filters. And through the filtering process, the raw opportunities are winnowed until the exceptional opportunities remain. And I want to be clear that when I say tournament structure, I don't mean there has to be a single winner. Many of these tournaments will allow a collection of exceptional opportunities to pass through the end, American Idol being an exception. Okay. Now, I want to I've argued that tournaments are a structure that is used for innovation problem solving in a wide variety of industries. But I got to confess here that as an operations guy, it bothers me a little bit. All right? And why is that? Well, if you think about it from an operations perspective, if I start with 10,000 molecules and I produce one Zocor, we have a word in operations for the other 9,999. We call it scrap, right? It's waste. In the words of the Toyota production system, it's muta, right? It's a really bad thing. In operations, we drive it into people that do it right the first time. You know, don't invest in things you aren't going to ship. You know, eliminate waste, right? And tournaments are very wasteful. Most of what you produce in a tournament is waste. Now, so as I say, it kind of bothers me. And so I can live with it, but I want to just for completeness and for intellectual coherence point out that we don't always need tournaments. All right? And let me take an example from engineering software. We face the innovation problem of what the roof beam in a metal building ought to be like. Now, most of us would not suggest that we collect 10,000 alternatives and we build some prototypes and we see which ones handle the snow loads. And the ones that are most promising, say the 5,000 most promising ones, maybe we prototype those, put those into production, try them out in the field, and then we pass forward, so forth and so on. That's not the way we do it, right? We have better ways to do it. And in fact, the way we do it is we go back to Euler and Timoshenko and what we learned in engineering school, and we can generally, on one or two passes, we can get to a near optimal or pretty good solution for certain kinds of problems. All right? So again, for intellectual honesty, I want to say tournaments are the second best way to do things. You'd rather not use them. You'd rather use science. All right? So if you have science, you want to use it. But the problem is we just don't have science for much of the innovation landscape. Pharmaceutical companies have been trying for decades to say, okay, I want to prevent hair loss. Let me see if I can understand the biological mechanism. Let me find the protein that causes hair follicles to fall out. Let me see if I can interfere with its mechanism. And then let me see if I can design a molecule that has a hydrogen in just the right place that will go in there and interfere with the protein. That's called rational drug design. And they can't do it. All right, they don't know how to do it yet. And so they would do it if they had the science, but they don't have the science. And so again, for completeness, let me say tournaments are what you do if you don't have science, but we don't have science. All right, in this area we pretty much don't have science. And so we're relegated to a tournament structure. Okay, so that's the framework. Now let me talk about the way to improve the performance of tournaments, or 4 ways to improve the performance of tournaments. And what I want to do here is I want to first introduce a very simple view of what a tournament is. A tournament is a generation process that provides a lot of opportunities, and a filtering process that differentiates the good ones from the bad ones. All right? And I'll just point out now that in most opportunity creation processes in innovation, you have 2 fundamental streams of opportunities. There's a stream that are generated internally. You and other smart people get in a room or work on your cubicles and figure out what you ought to be doing. And the other stream is an external process where you listen to your customers, you look at what competitors are doing, you watch what little companies are doing, you go to COFES and network, and you figure out what you might do, and you bring those together into a pool of opportunities for what you might do next. Now, I've shown here this bell curve here that is intended to reflect a statistical distribution of quality on those opportunities. And if you think about that, you can kind of imagine generating opportunities with the better ones being up high, and they're relatively rare statistically. And so what your hurdle does is it filters most of the average stuff and allows just the exceptional stuff to clear. So kind of from a statistical view, you can imagine a process that has some statistical properties and a filter that then is able to somehow differentiate the stuff at the very top end of that bell curve. All right. Now again, those cynics in the audience are saying, yeah, well that sounds like kind of an academic concept. So I had the same reaction. I'm a fairly practical guy. And so I said, I wonder what the statistical properties really are of that opportunity creation process. So I developed a little piece of software called the Darwinator. And it turns out it's a really useful thing for doing innovation, but it's especially useful for getting some data on innovation. So the way the Darwinator works is it helps to organize innovation tournaments within an organization. And it has a first phase in which participants submit innovation opportunities with a title and a description. And then it has a second phase in which a group of individuals, could be the same or different, come back and evaluate those opportunities, in this case on a simple 1 to 10 scale, in terms of their merit for further exploration. And it does it in a way that it draws randomly from the opportunities, excluding your own, excluding the ones you submitted. So it's a way of doing rapid peer evaluation in a way that you get decent statistical properties on the evaluations. So you can use this to get some statistical properties, and here's what they look like. All right, so this is a histogram of 234 opportunities that were generated by a group of 47 individuals. These happen to be taken from my executive MBA course at Wharton, where we generate new venture opportunities. The same course, by the way, that led to the TerraPass business. And so it's very real. It's done by people who are working full-time, but it's done in a course context where I can subject them to things like using experimental software. And let me give you a sense of what this distribution is like. So the worst idea was one called revenge social networking. That Okay, enough said. The best was a pretty nice idea. This is from about 3 years ago, I think, and it was an idea for brokering medical tourism for semi-elective surgery. And it was 2 Indian guys who said, look, there's a huge arbitrage opportunity between surgery in India, surgery in the U.S. For the uninsured, it's an extremely attractive option, but your biggest question if you're going to Mumbai for bypass surgery is, which hospital, who's the good doctor, how do I set this up, and what we'll do is we'll solve that problem for you. So that was the best idea. And there's a whole lot of middling ideas in there. And so this, first of all, was confirmation to me that I can look at some statistical properties. I can think about some statistical properties of this population of opportunities that's out there. And by the way, I've done this now with maybe 30 other populations, and they all look like this. All right, this is what and if you think about it, it's not surprising, right, that there's some really good ideas out there, there's some really bad ones, and there's a lot of kind of average ideas. So they exhibit this kind of unimodal thing with skinny tails. It shouldn't surprise us. Okay, now if you take that statistical view of innovation, which I'm now arguing you can, we can now think about it statistically and the way a process guy would think about it. And I'm going to argue that there are at least 4 ways to improve the performance of that system. And let me just say what they are, and then I'll show you some results and some ways to think about how they work. So the first thing you can do, if you have a process that has statistical properties like this, and you want to find more exceptional opportunities, well, the first thing you do is you take more draws from the distribution. Right? So let's imagine that you're looking for a 7-foot-high basketball. You're looking for tall basketball players. If there's one 7-footer in a city of 100,000, if you look in 2 cities, you're probably going to find 2. Right? So there's just simple laws of statistics that says if I take more draws from this distribution, that is, if I generate more opportunities, I'm likely they're going to be more exceptional opportunities. Right? That's approach number 1. Approach number 2 says, well, if you can shift the mean of distribution upwards, you're going to get more ideas over the bar. Right? So if you can somehow take this process and get it to produce better ideas on average, better opportunities on average, then you're also going to have more exceptional opportunities. So that's lever number 2. Lever number 3, and I'm going to go back and show you some data and so forth on those, but I just want to lay out the levers first. Lever 3 is, this one's a little mind warping, and so I'll show you an example in a minute. But lever number 3 is increase the variance in this distribution. So even if the mean is the same, even if this histogram has the same average, if I squish it, right, so it has more variance, then I'm going to have more exceptional opportunities as well. I'm going to have more terrible ones too, but I'm going to have more exceptional ones as well. And last, if my hurdle is more discerning, right, if I'm better able to discern which are the exceptional opportunities, if I have better fidelity in my hurdle, then I'm also going to be able to find more exceptional opportunities. All right, so let me talk about these 4 in turn in a little more detail. All right, so first, generating more opportunities. If I were to take, let's imagine that my world of opportunities for innovation opportunities exhibited this kind of statistical distribution. If I were to take only 1 draw from this distribution, on average, how good would I expect it to be on a scale of 1 to 10? Somebody give me a number, roughly. 5.5, something like that. It's the mean, right? I take 1 draw, I expect it to be at the mean. Now, sometimes it's going to be higher, sometimes it's going to be lower, but on average, it's going to be at the mean. All right. I take a second draw, and I look not at their average, but I look at the best of those 2. So I take 2 draws, I look at them, I say, how good's the best of those 2? When I take the second draw, does the best get better or worse than if I were to take just 1 draw? It better get better, right? If I take 2 draws from this distribution, I better have a better alternative than if I were to look at just 1. So it gets better, right? I take the third draw. Does the best of those three get better or worse? Gets better, right? Okay, by the time I've taken 100 draws, all right, when I take the 101st draw, how much better an opportunity do I have than when I just took 100? Well, it's still better, but it's only a little better. All right, so that idea we can actually analyze statistically. We can do some math, and we can draw a curve. And this is the curve. The curve is the quality of the best opportunity you have in front of you as a function of how many you draw, as a function of how many you look at. And this is from a branch of statistics called extreme value theory that says what is the extreme, what is the best of a population as a function of how many I take from the distribution. Now there's there's only two striking things about this graph to me. One is, may not be striking, one is it has just the shape you would expect it to have, which is things get better in a hurry. The first few ideas you take, things are getting really much better in a hurry. And then you get kind of diminishing returns. By the time you've looked at a lot of ideas, the chance that the next one you look at is going to be better than anything you've seen before, well, that gets less and less likely. But to me, the really striking thing about this graph is the absolute value of the numbers on the horizontal axis, which are huge to me. Because we're not really getting those diminishing returns until we're up around 100 new venture opportunities. And I think to most of my corporate experiences where we look at opportunities, and we're down in here somewhere. We're looking at 20. We really get rolling, we're looking at 40. We're down in here, and there's still a long ways to go in terms of how good the best is going to get as a function of how many we look at. All right, so now the caveat here is this is for a particular domain, right? This is new venture opportunity with this population based on this data, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't look a lot different for the domains you're all in. That probably if you're looking at 6 opportunities, you're not looking at enough. And the very first thing you can do, the very first lever you have is you just dial up the number of draws you're taking. You just work harder, longer, with more people to generate more from the same distribution you're already generating. Now, clearly embedded in this is an assumption that these draws are independent of each other, right? That when I've generated 200, I can generate a 201st, and it comes from the same distribution. And that's not strictly true, right? I mean, there are some domains where after you've worked on them for a while, it's like fish in a pond. You've pulled all the big fish out of that pond, and you're going to have to fish for a really long time to find another good fish. But I think that situation is pretty far out. And so in general, I think this insight holds. Okay. I'm going to skip that. All right. So the second insight, second lever is shifting the mean. Now let me just give you 2 ways you can shift the mean of this distribution. First, this distribution came from 47 individuals. Now I can imagine 2 reasons this distribution can have this kind of variance in it. One would be that every one of those 47 individuals exhibits that kind of variance in the quality they generate. And the other would be that the individuals are all really different in the quality of the ideas they're generating. Right? I mean, this could be a distribution of the skills and abilities of the individuals, or it could be a distribution of the quality of ideas generated by any one individual. Either of those could give you this shape. It turns out it's mostly differences in individuals. All right, so if you take, and I'm going to gloss over statistics here, but basically if you find a way to take the 25%, the top quartile of your team, in terms of their ability to generate opportunities, and you look at their distribution relative to that of the whole, that's what you're going to get. All right? So honestly, if you had a way to figure out who the top 25% were, you could pretty much send the other 3/4 home in terms of finding the very best ideas. Now, let me not be a mean guy here and say that this is true of almost any pursuit that we engage in. If we were to measure our times in the 100-meter dash, we would find this to be true. If we were to look at Salesforce performance, we would find this to be true. So this is just to be expected in a heterogeneous group of professionals. But I guess what I would say about this from a managerial standpoint is there are ways to discern who's really good and who's not. And the right thing to do from a resource allocation standpoint is to allocate resources to those who are really good at this, and allocate resources to the others at something they're really good at, which might not be this. Right? All right, so that's one way to shift the mean. The other way you can shift the mean is by doing targeted creation of opportunities. And let me say what I mean by that. One of the ways that you can impose strategic intent on the innovation process is by baking your strategic criteria into your filters. So if you say, we want to be more customer focused in our innovations, you could put customer focus into your selection criteria. And you could take anything that came over the transom, you could filter it based on those criteria, and in fact you would find a way to impose your strategic intent. The other way you could do it is say, we're going to have some workshops that focus specifically on generating opportunities that are focused on customers. We're going to do customer immersion, we're going to do observational studies, we're going to look at complaints, whatever the mechanisms you could imagine would be for finding more opportunities that are focused on customers. You could do those on the front end. And what that effectively does is shifts the mean of your opportunity pipeline to be more aligned with the quality measures that you care about. Okay, the third lever you have is variance, and I want to make just a couple points here. The world has been overrun with the managerial concept Six Sigma. Most of you know that idea. And the whole idea behind Six Sigma is take a process and just squeeze the variance out of it so that it produces the same thing over and over and over again. So if you have a chain of pizza restaurants, Six Sigma says get every restaurant to produce the same pizza every night, right? 100 in a row that are absolutely perfectly the same. That's the whole idea behind Six Sigma. That's exactly the wrong logic for innovation. All right? What you want in innovation is a pizza chef that produces 99 terrible pizzas and one utterly sublime pizza. That would be preferred. And so if you think about a distribution, the Six Sigma logic says, given a process with some distribution of output, let me see if I can squeeze out the variability so it's all centered right on the target. The innovation logic says, I'd actually rather have that distribution. 99 inedible pizzas and one sublime pizza would be better. Because in innovation, you're going to throw out everything but the best. That's intrinsic to the tournament structure. And so often the managerial mindsets and attitudes we have about innovation guide us towards towards reduction in variance, where we need to actually just learn to live with variance when it comes to the quality of opportunities and actually embrace it, actually seek it out, which speaks to the kinds of people we involve, the kinds of places we look for opportunities, and the kinds of processes we use to generate opportunities. All right, the last lever is the fidelity with which we're able to detect the exceptional opportunities early in the process. What's this? What this is some trajectories of real opportunities in a real tournament. Right? And let me explain what it is. In that same innovation setting that I just described, we had three filters. We had an opportunity pitch in which individuals got up with one PowerPoint slide and made a 1-minute pitch for their medical tourism idea or whatever it was. Then we had them work for 2 weeks to develop a solution concept. That becomes a 2-slide presentation with a 2-minute pitch, but there are fewer of them. We've filtered already. We then evaluate, and they spend 4 weeks developing a business plan, a full business plan that then we evaluate with an investment survey. Would you put your money into this thing? What I show here are the raw opportunities that were pitched. Their position on the vertical is their rating, their quality rating in a peer evaluation. All right, so the one at the top was the top rated. These were the bottom rated. All right? And it was a discrete evaluation scheme, which is why you have multiple opportunities at the same level. All right? Now, let's look at some trajectories. Opportunity A is not too surprising. It was a pretty clever idea from the beginning. It was a web-based adventure reading tool for kids where you could create your own adventure story and it would help teach you to read. It was a cute idea. Everyone liked it. It started out highly rated. It ended up highly rated. Opportunity E was also no surprise. It was what we all thought was a dumb idea about auctioning online gaming characters. And it continued to be a dumb idea all the way to the end. Maybe they're off making millions with it now, but no one liked it ever. Now by the way, a good point is raised here. These filters are imperfect, and one of the ways I manage that is I allow champions to champion ideas even if no one else likes them, and we let that happen. So you can marry the champion and the more objective filters. But anyway, that one's no surprise. It was poorly rated early, poorly rated later. Opportunity B is interesting though. Opportunity B began as a video recipe site on the web. It came back the second time as Foodilio and had these just fascinating attributes, which I'm not going to describe because it's now a business, embryonic anyway. And by the time it ended up as a business plan, everyone said, wow, that thing is amazing. All right? And opportunity C is also interesting because it started out with a pitch that went something like, how many of you are golfers? How many of you have lost a golf ball? What we're going to do is take this RFID ink painted on the golf balls, and we're going to give you a little device to find your golf ball. And everyone said, wow, that's a great idea. They came back at, the second week. They showed a little rendering of what the product would look like and how it would work. They came back on the business plan pitch, and they said, we found out it's not going to work. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to wear these goggles. And, right? Now, that's totally normal, right? That's just what happens because you don't know everything from the beginning. This is why you have a tournament. You're going to resolve uncertainty. But here's what you have to think about. If I were to find the top 5 opportunities at the business plan pitch, how deep in the opportunity set at the opportunity phase do I have to go to be sure I got those top 5? All right, now if you look back, let's take those top 5. You look back, I got to go 2/3 of the way down that list before I'm sure that I got the ones that ended up. I can't cut half these opportunities without a false negative, right? Without killing something that was going to emerge later as a winner. And so, I mean, there's a lot more that could be said about this, but if you've got to think about the shape of that funnel and what's the risk of a false negative and trade that off against what's the cost of taking an opportunity at the next level in the tournament. Okay, I'm going to skip and close with 2 caveats. First, all of this assumes the opportunity, the raw idea, is really important. All right? And I want to just give a caveat. With Zocor, it's really important. C25H3805. You get that wrong by 1 hydrogen, the bunnies die in the lab. All right? It's no good. It's not a product, right? All Merck does is reveal the intrinsic properties of that raw opportunity. Most innovation is pretty different from that. In particular, look at cars. A hotshot race car named Lightning McQueen gets waylaid in Radiator Springs where he finds the meaning of friendship and family. Now, my sense is that Pixar could take almost any sentence we came up with in this room, and they could make a movie that would gross $60 million, right? Now, I made that argument once to somebody from Disney, and they said, no, that sentence is everything. Everything's but I'm not really buying that, at least not relative to Merck. So let me just say, a good idea is always better than a bad idea, right? But in some industries, the opportunity is everything, and in some industries, it's nice to have. Last caveat. I've described to a group of software folks the classic waterfall approach. Right? This is a cascade. It's a pure cascade, basically, where you start with opportunities, you cascade them through, and you end up with winners. And that's not the way a lot of stuff is done in software, for example. There's more spiral models, whirlpool models, other ways of thinking about this, where you start with a reasonable first guess, and then you go build a prototype and you test it and you make it better and you improve it. And I want to just acknowledge right now that in most real innovation tournaments are not pure cascades. There's going to be some whirlpooling. But even in industries where the whirlpool or the spiral approach is quite powerful, on the front end of that, I still think you'd rather be pursuing opportunities that have competed with a bunch of others for being the most promising. And so in almost any industry, I think you can find a balance between a whirlpool and a cascade in terms of getting this innovation process to work. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And Brad, good. Or let's see, do I have, how many minutes do I have? 0? 10 minutes. All right, who's got a question? Yes?
The filtering that you're talking about in the cascading reference, I think that's accurate if the filtering is homogeneously effective across all of the options. But in many situations, it's more like a Tinko game than it is a homogeneous application. How can you assure homogeneity of your filtering across divergent interests or divergent opportunities?
Great question. So here's what I would say. Take my Horizon 1, 2, 3 thing. You definitely don't want to put genetic savings and clone and a recycled paper post-it note in the same filter process. So generally what I advise is in this process, the very first step in the opportunity generation process is sort into strategic buckets. And the strategic buckets, a good way to do that is Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. Within Horizon 1, you run your tournament with a very consistent set of filters. The filter for Horizon 1 is going to be very different from what you're going to want for Horizon 3. So it's a great point. Yeah, go ahead.
Like the concept, actually, we applied it to various companies to change how they were doing things. But one of the things I found in implementing both Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3, and the filtering mechanisms was the ability of people that came up with the ideas, characterize those ideas. You go and go to a really great example of Pixar, and that nice little statement saying, here's the concept, and go out and sell it. There are tons of really great ideas that the guy who came up with a great idea couldn't sell for like competitive money. And yet, further down the stream, somebody else helped them reshape that. Went off to an independent producer, and now everybody goes, why didn't we take that idea? You know, it's Lord of the Rings. It's, you know, Harry Potter.
Right. Great. So excellent question here, which is, what is the role of the messenger and of the means by which an idea is articulated, the quality and clarity of the articulation of the opportunity relative to its intrinsic properties? And again, the Pixar Cars example is a great one because there's a unique and unambiguous description of what the opportunity is. It's a compound. And they have a good canonical data structure for describing what it is. And that's not true for most opportunities. And I guess I have two responses to that. One is, it's a very interesting area of research that I'd like to look at in greater detail, because I think that there's a huge role for both the clarity of articulation and for the role of the champion in articulating value in an opportunity. The second idea, though, which is I think also important, is I think you have to bundle those things together, that what you're evaluating is not just the raw idea, but also the quality of the champion and the quality of the articulation of that idea. And so to some extent, that's why you need that wide filter initially, is because you don't know how it's going to shake out down the road, whether when you articulate it more better, it's going to improve its odds, or when a well-articulated bad idea is exposed to the greater light of day, it's going to turn out to be less promising. Yeah, go ahead.
On that point, would you consider an active filter? That is, where there are some, let's say, consultants involved to refine what the champion's trying to say?
Yes. So there's a whole set of trade-offs there. And in general, what I would say, first of all, in the Darwinator, what we did in response to exactly that issue, and let me repeat the suggestion in case it wasn't heard, is that the filter could be active. The filter could contribute to the quality of the idea, which is a wonderful idea. In the Darwinator, what we did was very early on, the first release of the software, somebody said, you know, I really had things to say about these ideas. And so we just added a simple comments field, which let anyone add to or improve or even spawn variants of ideas that were in the Darwinator. And that's one way you can do it. However, you face a efficiency-accuracy trade-off here, which is if you run a workshop with 50 opportunities that are being pitched, if you discuss and improve every one, you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to spend all your time on that. And so I do think there does come a time where you have to be very disciplined and just say, we're going to apply a brutal filter. We're going to be generous in how high the hurdle is to make sure we don't have so many false negatives. But no, we're not going to talk about every idea. You know, we're just going to be fairly brutal about that.
I think I love it, except I think this puts a lot of onus on the filters themselves. Can you talk a little bit about how specifically you define the filters, and were those filters made known to the contributors before?
Yeah, so the observation is that this puts a lot of onus on the filters. The filters have to be good, and do you articulate the criteria to the contributors? And I think a lot of that is dependent on your setting. Whether you would feed that back or not. I mean, I would say the filters are everything here, right? I mean, they're clear. Well, actually, there's a filter and there's a generator. Both are critically important. I'm happy to provide links to the book, even the manuscript of the book, if anyone wants. But we have chapters on what each of those filters look like, and that's, I think, where I'll just leave it. But I'm out of town, I think. So, thank you.
Karl was kind enough to forward me his PDF of the presentation this morning, and it's already up on the secure portion of the COFES website, so you can download it right now, if you haven't already. Also, Karl will be joining us at 11 o'clock in 9007 for the Keynoters analyst briefing, if you care to join us. It's a small room, first come, first serve. At this point in time, Karl, thank you again. Wonderful. This time we need to get up and scoot on down to the analyst briefings, to the tech suite briefings. 5002.